When I first moved into the quiet cul-de-sac, I expected only a peaceful place to set up my workshop and settle into retirement. My property sat on a parcel legally separated from the subdivision long before the HOA existed, something the county map clearly showed. Still, the HOA board refused to accept it. On my third morning, Brenda, the HOA president, marched up my driveway with a clipboard. She claimed my work truck violated their rules and demanded I remove it. I told her I wasn't part of their HOA, but she acted as if that didn't matter. I realized then they were determined to control anything they could see from their street, no matter the facts presented to them. The next day, a bright orange violation notice appeared on my door with a $500 fine. I tossed it in the trash. Later, Brenda returned with 2 board members, insisting I sign a compliance form. Again, I said, "I'm not in your HOA." They left angrily, threatening consequences. That evening, pounding on my door startled me. 2 police officers stood outside. They said the HOA reported that I refused to follow neighborhood rules. I showed them my deed, survey lines, and exemption documents. They quickly apologized and confirmed the HOA had no authority over me. Across the street, the board watched, expecting a different outcome. Their smug expressions vanished when the officers left. Brenda shouted that I couldn't hide behind paperwork and that I would eventually learn to obey their rules. What none of them knew was that I had recently purchased the land beneath their entire subdivision from the original developer. Their long-term land leases were close to expiring, and the renewal terms were now in my hands. They were about to learn the truth soon. Everything was already in motion. The consequences would arrive sooner than they expected. The morning after the police visit, the neighborhood felt different. People who had barely glanced at me before were suddenly watching from their porches as if waiting for a show. I figured Brenda had already spun some dramatic version of events to rally the rest of the HOA against me. Sure enough, around noon, I found a folded letter shoved into my mailbox, printed with the HOA's official letterhead. It accused me of creating disruption, refusing to comply with established regulations, and endangering community harmony. I almost laughed. They truly believed they ruled the entire block. I placed the letter on my kitchen counter and went back to work on a shelving project in my workshop. An hour later, a loud knock echoed. This time it was Mark, the HOA vice president, who seemed slightly more reasonable than Brenda, though not by much. He wore a stiff smile and explained they wanted to avoid further escalation. He offered me an introductory orientation packet as if I were a new employee violating dress code. I told him, calmly but firmly, that my property was legally exempt. He sighed dramatically and warned that non-cooperation could have serious consequences. What he didn't realize was that I was already reviewing the subdivision's lease documents in detail. The land the HOA members lived on wasn't theirs, it was leased for 99 years from the original developer. And when that developer defaulted on a massive loan, I bought the entire land package at a discounted price. Their home sat on land I now owned, and their leases were due for renewal within months. Later that evening, I saw Brenda and the board gathered near the mailbox cluster, glaring in my direction. They had no idea the power dynamic had already shifted. The moment they pushed too far, I'd show them exactly who controlled their fate. The next week arrived with a level of pettiness I didn't think adults could reach. Every morning I stepped outside to find a fresh stack of notices taped to my door: parking violations, landscaping citations, noise complaints, even a warning about improperly positioned trash bins, despite the fact that mine were stored neatly behind the gate. It didn't matter what I did, the HOA had decided I was their villain, and they were determined to bury me under paperwork. Still, I refused to engage. I simply collected each notice, slid it unopened into a folder, and set the folder aside. I knew it would be useful later. But something else began happening. Neighbors started approaching me quietly. The first was an older man named Jeff, who whispered that the HOA had been bullying people for years. He told me Brenda once fined a family $200 for planting the wrong shade of flowers. Another woman confessed she wanted to move but couldn't sell because the HOA made every potential buyer's life miserable during inspection. It was clear the board ruled through intimidation, not order. That same afternoon, the HOA called for an emergency community meeting, clearly aimed at discussing me. I received no invitation, of course, but I didn't need one. My workshop window faced the clubhouse lawn. I watched as Brenda stood in front of a crowd, dramatically waving a stack of supposed infractions, claiming I was destroying the neighborhood's standards. A few people nodded, but many looked uncomfortable. While they ranted, I finalized the renewal terms for their land leases. Each homeowner would need to sign a new agreement within 60 days, and while the terms were fair, they also required cooperation and timely communication, two things the HOA had completely failed to show. By the end of their meeting, Brenda loudly declared she'd force that man to obey. She had no idea how badly that declaration would backfire. The following morning began with the sound of Brenda marching up my driveway yet again, but this time she wasn't carrying her clipboard, she was carrying a camera. Without a word, she began snapping pictures of my yard, my truck, even the side of my house. When I stepped outside and asked what she thought she was doing, she replied, documenting violations for legal action. I told her to leave my property immediately. She smirked, took one last picture, and announced, "You'll regret this." Then she strutted away as if she had just won something. I shook my head and went back inside, but her behavior only confirmed what I already knew: the HOA was spiraling, desperate to establish control before they lost it completely. Still, their actions didn't worry me. I had spent the last several days reviewing every lease, every map, every contractual detail linking the subdivision to the land beneath it. Everything was clear, airtight, and fully in my favor. Later that day, I decided it was time to move things forward. I contacted a property attorney to finalize the renewal packets. Each homeowner would receive one, outlining the updated lease terms. The moment those packets were delivered, the HOA would realize the ground they stood on literally belonged to me. My attorney chuckled when I explained the situation. "They're not going to take this well," he said. I told him that was an understatement. Around sunset, I stepped outside and found Brenda and the board standing in a huddle near my mailbox, whispering intensely. The second they spotted me, they scattered like guilty children. Clearly, they were planning something, though I doubted they understood how little power they actually had. That night, I sealed the envelopes for all 36 homes in the subdivision. Tomorrow, their reality would shatter. They thought I was the problem, but soon they'd realize I was. The next morning, I walked through the neighborhood with a stack of envelopes under my arm, each one containing the updated land lease renewal. Some residents watched from their windows, others hurried inside when they saw me approaching, clearly influenced by the HOA's dramatic storytelling. I didn't mind. By noon, every home had received its packet. Now all I had to do was wait. The reaction came faster than expected. Around 3 in the afternoon, Brenda stormed toward my house, waving her envelope like it was on fire. "What is this supposed to mean?" she snapped. "You can't just send people fake legal documents." I calmly told her to read the ownership section again, slowly this time. Behind her, several homeowners gathered, looking confused, worried, or both. "I don't know what scam you're trying to run," she said loudly, "but the HOA owns this community, not you." I pulled out my own copy of the deed, stamped and recorded, proving I had purchased the entire land parcel months earlier. My attorney arrived moments later, carrying a full binder of legal confirmation. He explained, very clearly, that every homeowner was indeed leasing the ground beneath their homes, and those leases were set to expire. New terms were required for renewal, all fully enforceable. The crowd went silent. Even Brenda couldn't find words. Several neighbors approached me, asking polite questions, apologizing for the harassment they hadn't realized was unfounded. But Brenda, refusing to accept defeat, attempted one last power move. She declared the HOA would challenge everything in court. My attorney simply smiled. "You're welcome to try," he said, "but you'll be paying legal fees on land you don't own." By evening, the entire neighborhood understood the truth. The HOA's power vanished overnight. As for Brenda, she resigned 2 days later. In the end, all they had to do was leave me alone, but they insisted on learning the hard way.